I want to die. No, I'm good. Let's go.
Book Blitz. Dylan wants to die.
No,
Chapter 6. Scary Stories.
Scary stories.
So, Bella that night goes home. She meets up with Charlie and tells him that she's going to go to La Push. That's the name of the place. And it's this place on the Indian reservation nearby. It's the beach that she's going to on Saturday. And she asks about the particular place that Edward said he was going to go hiking. And he was like, no, that's not a hiking place. That's a hunting place. There's a lot of bears. And so she goes. She thinks that's unusual. She goes the next day to the hiking trip or the camping trip to the beach. And it turns out that there's plenty of people going that they really wouldn't have had room for Edward in the car anyway. And so while they're there, they start kind of wandering around. It's a really cool place, but they meet up with a number of kids from the reservation, including one in particular named Jacob. And people start at some point talking with everybody. They mention the Cullens, and one of the older kids from the reservation says, "Oh, they don't come here," and it sounds like very definitive, like they're not allowed to come here. The Cullens aren't allowed to come to the reservation, which Bella thinks is really interesting. She starts getting to know the kid named Jacob, and he's like a couple years younger than her. But he's pretty mature for his age, and he's really into mechanic work and like cars and all this stuff, and he's trying to fix up a car. And they start joking around. They actually, I don't think they didn't know each other.
No, they did,
they did.
Yeah. In my version, they I think in both versions, like because Charlie had some sort of connection with the reservation, and so he's like interacted with them for a while. And so when Bella was young, she and Jacob had actually hung out briefly.
Yeah, that's right.
And in my version, Julie, as Jacob was known in my version, Julie tricks Bella into thinking that he remembered her because she remembered him because he had pulled her hair when he was young, and then just like made you think that, and he's like, "Oh, you're funny." Yeah.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's like. She goes, "Yeah, I remember because you pulled my hair." And he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And he goes, "No." She's like, "No, I'm just kidding." And he goes, "Oh." He's like, "Oh." And then, anyway.
So he's apologizing for pulling hair like
way back
10 years ago?
Yeah, like, that's Bo. And in my book, Bo's like, he's like super, he's
like the ultimate doormat? Like...
No, not a doormat, exactly. Because he challenges Bella, or not Bella, challenges Edith, but on certain things. But he's like the super polite, would never intentionally hurt anyone in a social situation.
Okay, see, so that's good to know because that is a difference in the two characters. Like Bella is not specifically that way.
Like,
so that is kind of interesting that there is that divergence of their personalities to a degree.
I think it's just misremembering. I think we're remembering two different aspects of the same character differently and putting different emphasis on it.
Well, I mean, Bella's not really a rock the boat kind of person, but it's never explicitly that she's like so super polite she would
it's not like, well, it's never explicitly like that in mine, but that's what he does. You know what I mean? Like, with the exception of that one time when Tiffany shows up and he's blocked in and he realizes that she knew that he'd already said no to other people, and he's like, no.
Yeah.
And
then, anyway, so Bella's talking to Jacob, and eventually she really wants to get to know more about the Cullens because it seems like the kids from the reservation.
There's
a mystery.
Edith saved him, and so that's never been fully explained. Dr. Cullen was in on it. The Cullens are special, clearly. And then here's this in my version, a girl clearly does not want the Cullens around and says that they're actually restricted from coming into this area. And she goes on like a walk with Julie.
So she starts going with...
Or he goes on a walk with Julie.
Yeah. So Bella and Jacob go on a walk. And Bella starts... I don't know about your version, but Bella starts like cranking up the flirtation.
No, she kind of... he's kind of flirty with Bo. Bo is kind of flirty with Julie. In an attempt to kind of get more about the Cullens out.
Right, and it works. Like,
Yeah.
and so Jacob starts telling her this
Tale of the
spooky
people.
story about how basically his tribe, according to legend, he doesn't believe any of it, but according to legend, his tribe is made up of werewolves, and the Cullens are the cold ones. They're some of the cold ones, which are like vampires. And the werewolves and the vampires are mortal enemies. And he's saying, you know, the cold ones came here like 100 years ago, and they were different than normal vampires. Like they didn't hunt people. They hunted animals. Like they were not the same. And so Bella's like, you know, oh, so the cold ones are somehow related to the Cullens? And he's like, no. The Cullens are the same people, supposedly, that were here 100 years ago. And he's like, yeah, I know, it's ludicrous, it's ridiculous. He doesn't believe a word of it. But she kind of starts believing it, and she's really intrigued by the whole thing. It's obvious Jacob doesn't believe it, but she's seen some crazy stuff, and so she doesn't know what to think. But I'm really kind of curious, like, you know, it sounds like there's some differences between our two versions, or at least in a sense.
If there's any real difference, it's because of the different way we've talked about the same book. Like, not the actual. I don't think there's really, frankly, any real tangible difference except for physical descriptions and names between the books. I just think that when we're talking about the same thing, we describe it differently, and so that's the perceived difference.
Possibly, yeah.
And so, because I, like, it's the same thing, you know. I don't know, like Julie in my version, Jacob. Yeah, she's a girl, you know what I mean. But she still loves cars. She's still looking for the same part. She asks, you know, have you seen this part of a car? And he's like, no, I'll keep a lookout for it.
Yeah.
It's all that, like, it's just gender bent. But moving on from the gender bentness, what I like about this chapter, I don't know, it's just refreshing to read a book where I realize I see all these things happening and go, that's real. Like, if a bunch of youngsters were just hanging out, you know what I mean, they'd be walking, then like, oh yeah, some random people would show up that some might know, some might not know. You know what I mean? That's realistic. Then they're just hanging out. Some would want to go get food, others would not, so they would split up. Like, all that.
It all
that
does
made
feel
sense.
very, very natural.
Yeah, like, you know, there's the part where I think, in my version, like, Tiffany's trying to get Zach, like, Beau's, like, anti-friend, you know what I mean? Like, his rival.
In my version, that's Tyler.
Tyler, okay. No, is it Tyler? Then, are you sure that's Tyler? Well, then...
I'm pretty sure in my version that's Tyler.
Well, there's the girl who almost hit Beau.
That's Tyler.
That's not his rival. She's friendly. She wants to date Beau. Then there's the person who doesn't like Beau because girl.
Oh. In my version, that's Angela, I think. But she's not an important character, like, at all.
She's just like not. She's very anti-Beau.
Yeah.
That person. That Tiffany's trying to get him to look at the CD that she has because she's kind of into him.
Yeah.
But he's being a dick to Beau. Like, there's a fire. They're just hanging out. Like, I don't know. It felt very real. I enjoyed it a lot because I was like, okay, this is real. Like, you would just be hanging out. You would just go walk on the beach with your friend. You would, like, peace out. I'm going over here with this girl. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally.
Anyway,
it does feel very realistic, and that honestly gives. That kind of stuff really gives the supernatural element a much more grounded and real feel.
Yeah, because this easily could have been just cheesy, another romance thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
But, and in a sense it is. But the way she's written the characters and everyone being real, making sense, being interesting, and yet not being impossible to a certain degree when it comes to the human interaction, like, that's what makes it to me. Because, like, in the end, the actual plot of, I'm in love with a super being, like, that isn't really interesting. But
No.
but these characters are interesting, and that unrealistic problem they're dealing with. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I find that's why I enjoy it.
Which, yeah, exactly, and that grounds the supernatural side. Like for example, the whole ghost story thing.
Yeah.
where Jacob is telling her about, the werewolves and the cold ones and whatever else, and these ancient legends. Like it's believable that there could be like a small group of people that have some people that believe this was their actual past. Like it sounds authentic enough that it works. Like, and I think that's probably the greatest strength outside of just the characters themselves. That's probably the greatest strength of the book so far that I can think of is just the believability and the groundedness of the situations. And then the situations kind of get spiced up by different things that happen. But like, even the craziest elements, even the most supernatural side of it, like for example later on when Bella goes and meets Edward's family, that is a supernatural situation because they are supernatural beings that is grounded by the very basic conflict
humanness.
Of the very humanness of, oh, I'm going to meet the family of the boyfriend, and so it makes the whole thing work way better that way, because the conflict, most of the conflicts in the book until near the end don't actually come from the supernatural aspect.
Yeah, it comes from
from the human interactions being believable.
Yeah.
And like the reasons why those things are happening, like the reasons why Edward was ignoring her. Yeah. That is based on the supernatural stuff, but it's
the human reaction in Edward of having like
that's the actual drama. It's not. There is mystery in what's going on with Edward. Oh, how did he do this crazy thing? But what actually pulls you in much more is why is Edward being such a dick? Yeah, that. It just really grounds it. It makes the whole thing flow much better and gets you invested much more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and I think that's, from what I remember, I don't know how strong that element is in the later books, because I think it kind of gets a little more wacky.
That's what I've heard. So, but the first book I think is the strongest from what I understand.
So, anyway, do you have any other thoughts about this chapter?
That is it. Bug Blitz.
Bug Blitz. End of chapter. Bug Blitz.
Bug Blitz.
Book Blitzes.
I'm gonna go take a humongous, gigantic piss.
Do it. Do it. Do it.
I might grab a coffee. Do you want a coffee?
Sure.
I'll make sure that I'll only give you a small coffee, and that way you have less coffee than I do.